Okay, we're now going to consider some possible causes of cultural difference. So we've seen in earlier lectures the idea that culture is essentially arbitrary, but some people argue that cultures are shaped by external factors, and so we'll consider four of those. And the first one is that of geography. So, for example, Felipe Fernandez Armesto, in his book Civilizations, divides the societies he considers into different categories based upon their ecological or environmental conditions. So, for example, he has categories of temperate woodland societies and tropical lowlands and small island societies. And so the implication is that these different environments create particular cultures that he can then talk about chapter by chapter. And Carol Quigley talks about the environment of the North-West Quadrant and how that has affected culture there. So let's have a look at that. So here's a map of the world island, and here's, well, that's the Mediterranean, and here's Europe and North Africa. And this is the North-West Quadrant. We divide it into four. And what Quigley points out is that this North-West Quadrant is on a horizontal axis of Eurasia and also on a north-south or vertical axis through Africa. So it's kind of receiving influences from both directions, whereas these, East Asia is really only on that one axis because this quadrant is mostly empty or has very simple societies. And similarly, this here is only on that axis, again, because there's nothing very much in that South-East Quadrant. And he'd also say that it connects the North Atlantic to the Indian Ocean as well. And it is internally diverse. It's geographically diverse with the Mediterranean, and there's mountains and there's plains and many different ecosystems all within that one area. So all this encourages trade, commerce, both within it and to the other regions. And so it's perhaps not surprising that the North-West Quadrant became the most advanced region, at least for a while, because of these multiple influences on it that the other parts of the world island don't benefit from. And Quigley also points out another factor on culture is highlands versus lowlands. So he draws on a map. There's a region of mountains from the Alps down to the Zagros Mountains in Iran, which is caused by the tectonic plates of Africa and Europe sort of smashing together, has raised a line of mountains as the land buckles up. So there are these mountains there, and then plains on either side. So this is in the Middle East, North Africa, and that's in the sort of Caspian Sea area, the Caucasus, Ukraine. And so this is the highlands, and these are lowlands. And he says what you find is that the two lowland areas have similar cultures which are different from the highland areas. So, for example, the highland areas have agglutinative languages. So they form words by sticking smaller words together to make very large words into whole phrases and even sentences. Whereas the lowland areas have inflected languages, which is where they take a basic word and then they put endings on. In English now, there's really only one ending, which is to add an S to make a plural. But in something like Latin, there were very complex or comprehensive sets of endings that you could put on to show whether it's a subject, the object of the sentence, whether it's giving to or from the thing. Also, he says in the mountains you find round-headed people, whereas in the lowlands, long heads. This is both lowland areas. The mountain people tend to be peaceful. They're also sort of peasant societies. They don't have very complex political hierarchies, and they tend to be matriarchal. Women have an important role in their societies, and they also tend to be earth worshippers. He says. Whereas the lowland societies, by contrast, they are pastoral. They keep flocks and herds. They're patriarchal rather than matriarchal. And he says that they are storm or sky worshippers. So with these arguments, we can see that the suggestion that the geographical conditions affect the way culture develops. Here it's kind of, there's a good explanation because this is the most diverse region and also the most kind of central region, most connected region. Here it's not quite clear why highlands would produce one and lowlands would produce another, but it does seem to be the case that there are these differences. It may be because there's actually a common heritage, not because lowlands by themselves create this kind of culture, but the people who lived here, let's say, were lowland people and used to lowland ways, so they moved into the lowlands, not into the highlands, which was a very different environment that they weren't adapted for. But with this suggestion, you know, Quigley's reflecting the same kind of thing that Fernando Thomasto is suggesting, that the environment, the ecology, affects the cultural outlook of a people. Another suggested influence on culture is energy needs, how a society meets its energy needs. So this is Barry Lord. in a book called Art and Energy. So he points out, for example, that when people relied on fire for their energy back in the Stone Age, people would sit around the campfire, and sitting around the campfire led to storytelling as a sort of key cultural practice. And so it's perhaps not surprising that a lot of our mythology comes from very ancient times, the Neolithic and into the Bronze Age, when people might have spent a lot of time sitting around campfires. Then he argues as well that the transition to coal in Europe as a source of energy was what allowed Europe to become the first region to abolish slavery that had been practiced previously all around the world and by every society. So it was coal, because it took over the energy needs from slaves, allowed slavery to become obsolete and be outlawed. And he also suggests how the interest in fossil fuels generally drove scientific interests in the West. Fossil fuels led, for example, to an interest in geology and paleontology. So, because people wanted to, know where they could find fossil fuels, and they're interested in the association of ancient organisms with particular fuels, fossil fuels. And then these things in turn, could have driven the Darwinism, the discovery of the great time depth of history, and also the idea from paleontology of the evolution of species. And then Darwinism in turn, led to a decline in religion and a move towards a more materialist world. So the energy source had far-reaching consequences in shaping cultural values and ideas. That's Barry Lord's argument. And another possible factor is that of disease. So in the societies of the ancient Near East that had lived in cities from very ancient times, thousands of years ago, and lived at high population densities, disease was a problem. And we know from the COVID pandemic, the ideas of social distancing and bubbles. We were supposed to, keep within our bubbles and not interact with people outside our bubble. Well, these ideas may have been also important in the ancient Near East then, where, as I said, disease was a problem. Social distancing and what we would now call bubbles. So these ideas may have led to tribalism. You would keep your distance from strangers, supposed to say tribalism. You'd keep your distance from strangers and you wouldn't interact with people from other tribes. You'd keep yourself to yourself. And so this may be why societies in the those areas where population densities were high in very ancient times remain tribal to this day. Whereas societies that evolved in regions of lower population density, for example in North-West Europe, were not so concerned about social distancing and bubbles, and so they didn't develop those habits of tribalism. And that leads on to our fourth possible factor, which is that of demography. So, we've just seen that the societies of the ancient Near East lived in very high population densities in cities from very early times, whereas in Northwest Europe people lived at lower population densities. And this more generally could have been responsible for the cultural differences that we see between those regions. And we can use the terminology from the paper discussed in the last part of this lesson, regions defined by or based on social structure, by Burton et al. So they talk of the middle old world, so that is the societies of the ancient Near East through India to China, and the North Eurasian circumpolar, so that's the north of Europe and all around the Arctic Circle. So these middle old worlds societies are characterized by cities and by high population densities. And the North Eurasian circumpolar societies, they lived in villages, or they were even nomadic bands. And so they were at low population density. And this meant for the middle old world that they had large families, and they were surrounded by many strangers. They experienced strangers as a normal feature of life. Whereas in the North Eurasian circumpolar, they had smaller families. They didn't have the large extended families, and there were few strangers around. They seldom encountered strangers. And in this situation, because you tended to have your large extended family was surrounding you, but there were also many strangers, people came to rely on their family for protection, security, support. And each family or each group would keep to themselves. So they learnt to get on with strangers by keeping their distance. So they wouldn't offer or receive help from others, from strangers. It just wouldn't be possible with so many strangers around. You would only often receive help from your own family. So the idea would be that those people, they don't bother us, we don't bother them. They'll just stick to themselves, but we, as an extended family, we all support each other. And over here, we can expect the opposite. So small families, small villages and bands, people developed habits of independence. They were quite wandering because, with so sort of small groups around, people would go out into the world to look for new excitement and new opportunities, because if you got fed up with your small family, or you wanted to go out and look for a partner, a husband or wife, you'd have to move around. So they're independent and wandered a lot, and so they developed habits of generalised reciprocity, which we discussed in an earlier part of this lesson. The idea that you show hospitality to strangers and you can expect when you're a stranger in town that you will also receive help from other people, hospitality from other people. And we could also compare this situation to how people behave in, I put Oxford Street, London's busiest shopping street, but so in a busy shopping street, compared to how people behave on a country walk. So if you're walking down Oxford Street, you just keep yourself to yourself. Other people are coming at you. They're just objects as far as you're concerned. You're not, interacting with them. You just avoid bumping into them. You'd only say hello if it was somebody you actually knew, or a family member. Whereas if you're on a country walk, then there aren't many people around. You may be on your own, and then you see somebody coming towards you. Then you're likely to say, "Oh, hello. Nice weather, isn't it? Have you come far, etc." So you will at least smile and nod at the other person. So that's how you would behave if there aren't many people around. But you couldn't do that in Oxford Street. You couldn't smile and wave to everybody who passes by. It would be crazy. So this is the kind of culture that these people develop, the kind of Oxford Street type approach to life, that other people are just things in the environment that you kind of don't bump into, but you get around. Whereas in these cultures, other people are humans, fellow human beings, and you treat them as people like people like yourself, and you're friendly to them. And so these distinct contexts led then to the two different ways of organizing culture and society. So this led to tribal attitudes, or we could say not just tribal but pluralist. So it's, you live in a world where it's not just your own tribe, but you're used to the idea that there are other tribes around you that, as we said, keep themselves to themselves, but you don't bother them and they don't bother you. So you don't expect other people to share your values. What they do is their own business. You don't expect them to show belonging. To sort of say, hey, we're all in this together, we're fellows. No, they're their tribe and you are your tribe, and you keep apart. You belong to your own tribe and they belong to their tribe. So you don't expect them to show belonging or just alignment with you, we could say. You don't expect any kind of sense of alignment. Whereas over here, it's the opposite. So they would be non-tribal. They don't have any reason to divide into distinct tribes. And so instead of being pluralists, we can say they're universalist. So you see other people as other humans, just like yourself. You don't see them as different from yourself, you see them as like yourself. And so you do expect these things. And we can also say here that this pluralist is a multicultural approach too. So you accept that there are multiple tribes, each with its own culture. So it's multicultural. and you're content with that. You're happy. You've got your culture and they've got their culture. So long as they don't bother you and you don't bother them, there's no reason to be upset or feel that there's any clash. Over here, though, you are expecting people to share values, show belonging, because you see them as fellow human beings and you expect to be seen as a fellow human being by them. So this is monocultural. You don't have the idea that, you know, other people may belong to a different group to which you are just a thing. You expect them to see you as a person. And another implication here is that you can't join other groups. This is our tribe. You know, why would you want to join us? The people of our tribe are our own relatives, our own descendants. You know, but you're in your tribe. So there's no reason for people to join a tribe. They're just in the tribe that they're born into. Whereas over here, when you see people as other human beings, there's no problem with them joining your group, coming into your village, because you're not tribal. You're universalist. You see them as just a person. So here they come into your village. There's nothing to stop them. But you do expect them to share your values and show that they belong and show alignment. You don't expect them to come in and treat you like things. You expect them to come in and treat you like people, like themselves, and, as I say, show that you belong here. And so the problem occurs when these two cultures meet. If this is your culture and everybody's like that, that's fine. You know, everybody accepts the idea that we're in our tribe and you're in yours. And if this is how everyone is, again, this works fine. Everybody sees everybody else as just a fellow human being. There's no standoffishness or anything like that. But when the people, say, from this culture move into societies characterized by that culture, then there's a problem, because they'll come into this kind of society and they'll expect to continue practicing their own culture and not adopt the culture of the wider society. Whereas the people here will say, well, what's wrong with these people? Why aren't they adopting our culture? They've come into our society, but they somehow see us as different from them, or see themselves as different from us. Why aren't they showing belonging? Why are they showing alignment? Why aren't they forgetting what tribe they belong to? They're just part of our world. So these people have the attitude that being different is okay. And these people have the feeling that you should fit in. And so these people are saying, well, why aren't these people fitting in? And these people are saying, well, why are these people expecting us to fit in? Why aren't they allowing us to be ourselves? So this is how demography and how the way the world was thousands of years ago has led to the evolution of these two different cultural attitudes that have persisted down to the present. But now, in a world that's far more mixed up, it can be becoming a problem, because two incompatible attitudes are now trying to work together. The multicultural attitude versus the monocultural attitude.